Good afternoon, everybody. I would like first to thank you deeply for the invitation and also for all the conference I heard this morning. I'm a bit not on this subject, but it has been very, very interesting for me, and I'm very deeply thankful for that. And I really feel the honor to be invited here today. Maybe some personal words, you have heard some words about me this morning, but maybe some personal words related to what we are talking about today. First, I spent my youth in Neuchatel, studying parasitology and also biology in Neuchatel, then in different universities from Switzerland and also abroad. And during this study, we had the shadow of the well-known natural scientists of Neuchatel, such as Agassi. So it has a link also to today, and also from the collection of Jakob von Tschudin, which I those didn't heard of it. And every morning I was going in the primary school and passing in front of Sir Dupree, which we heard about it this morning also. And I was living just near the chocolate fabric, Suchard, where Herr Suchard also built a minaret, which was sort of a very deep colonialist actions as well. And also I used to go to church in this beautiful cathedral here in Neuchâtel. And in this cathedral, there was a black young boy sitting on a box. And we used to put some pieces of money in this box, and the boy was nodding. So this is the context I've been born in it. I've been spent my youth in it without talking anything about it because I was not used to it. So I'm already old, but not that old. So I'm really very, very grateful and very happy that the canton of Neuchâtel and the city of Neuchâtel is interesting on these matters and also organize such a conference. I'm very proud of you all, because I'm not for anything for that. Thank you very much once more. And in my research also, I collected quite a lot of specimen, live or stuffed specimen, preserved specimen in Tanzania, on 3 continents. So in Africa, also in Tanzania, I saw this beautiful lichen which are still left there. So it's quite impressive. And also in Australia, in Tasmania, and also all over Europe for my phylogeography work for my PhD thesis. And most of the specimens ended in few museums. I also sampled platypus in Tasmania for the Smithsonian Museum in Washington. So I did quite a lot of collection. I'm not proud to say that we were very concerned with the right of animal, with biodiversity, with right of animals, and with right of people, of course. But we were handling lots of animals. That's why I put the right of animals before in my job. But also, of course, of right of people and indigenous people. But all the ethical questions, and all other questions are left it to us. And we had to tackle this question with our own principles and views. And in the last 20 years, I've been catched up by this ethical question. I have the honor to participate and to tackle this question in the Federal Office for the Environment, and also in the delegation dealing with the Convention of the Biodiversity, and that's the subject of my talk today. Right, so I will take you on a special journey, maybe in comparison with the other ones, other very interesting conference that has many parallels with the one that museum have been done for years, and that of integrating ethical and societal issue in their missions and their today work. These are specimens for the collection of Jakob von Tschudin. Some history, maybe on United Nations policy. So the convention is a policy of the United Nations, And maybe going back to the past, the first consideration about environment were done during the Economic and Social Council, also a sort of conference from the United Nations, where they mentioned in this declaration the environment. The change in the natural surroundings brought about man had become an urgent problem for developed as well as developing countries, and that this problem could only be solved through international cooperation. And in 1972, there was a huge conference focused on environment in Stockholm, where there was a declaration, an action plan, and on the end of this conference, the United Nations Environment Programme was born. And this program tried to enforce all the program on biodiversity and other conventions. And eventually, what in 92, I can just remember you, was a very important year. Just two small other facts. It's the year of the Maastricht Treaty, and it was also the year of the European economic crisis. Altogether, and nevertheless, this summit, because there are two main drivers also to put the work going on at the convention, that's why I say nevertheless. In 92, the Convention on Biological Diversity and two protocols in 10 and 200 were also discussed and signed according to this conference. Then we had also the Climate Change Convention. First of all, I have to say that in this conversation on the international level were focused on climate. And then it's just afterwards that it came to biodiversity, and it's developed also in biodiversity. And then in 94, the Convention to Combat Desertification. Let's go to the CBD after this historical introduction. The motivation of the convention was the observation that biodiversity is and was under increasing erosion, and that the distribution of resources and benefits of biodiversity were and are still unequally distributed. The drivers of this biodiversity loss are, in decreasing order, the change in land and sea use, exploitation of natural resources, climate change, pollution, and invasive species. So directly, 4 of these drivers are made man, indirectly climate change. These data, you can find them in a very good report of IPES, which is it's the Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which come from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. They are the basis of all scientific data for our work, most of it, and they are internationally recognized. So what is CBD? CBD is an instrument, legally binding instrument for the parties who signed and ratified this instrument, of course, and it advanced the concept of countries' environmental rights and responsibility. The convention has 3 goals: the conservation, the sustainable use, and has a third goal. Sorry for the spelling mistake. The third goal, which is an ethical goal. And it is also a tool to make functioning all the system together. Because of this benefit sharing, then it is supposed to make all the system work together, just on the concept. Coming from the, sorry, because I didn't mention that in the previous slide, but the Nagoya Protocol is a protocol which implements the question of the 3 goals of the convention: ABS, access and benefit sharing. So coming yet to the Protocol of Nagoya, And this protocol is very relevant for the museum because it's legally binding for some activities of the museum. That's the reason why I mentioned that as well. And the constatation was that the highest and richest biodiversity is found in mega biodiversity countries of the south, which are countries with weak economies or economies in transitions. And you can see also the flow of the resources, because for the use of the resources, the flow is going from south to north. And I heard many of these explanations this morning that the collection, what has been sampled in the south, is in Northern Museum. So this is also a reason of this protocol. And this protocol touch also the institutions, the museum, but also all the utilization of genetic resources for commercialization. For example, to make a perfume from a plant, from a country of biodiversity, a special plant, etc. We'll come to that afterwards. So it was a constatation that there are big discrepancies, and these discrepancies are still raising before north and south. And we can see also on this slide that the mega biodiversity countries, as we call them in the Biodiversity Convention, are also the countries where the resources, the genetic resources, are at most under threat. So coming back to the convention there, so you have the convention of biodiversity with the 3 goals, the protocol, which is setting into force the third goals, and then we have in Switzerland also national regulation, because if a convention or a protocol is ratified by a country, it's the same thing in any countries with a party, they have to, it's a duty, they have to develop national regulation. So in Switzerland we have an ordinance and a law, and in Europe there is also a directive about that. But I will not go into details. The purpose of my presentation is not going into low details, but I'm ready to ask for questions. So what do we mean under the convention, access and benefit sharing? Access and benefit sharing, it refers really to the way genetic resources may be accessed. So the way you go in a country and you take the genetic resources. And the second part of it is how you share the benefit which are resulting from this access. So what are the benefits that you are having with these resources? And we use 2 terms, provider and users. Coming to the scope of the Nagoya Protocol, maybe because we talk a lot of collections, and not all collection and everything from museum is covered by the Nagoya Protocol. So the protocol shall apply to the genetic resources and to the benefit arising to their utilization. But as there is a constatation that the indigenous people are guardians of the biodiversity and conserve their biodiversity and use it sustainable, much more sustainably as we do, as a matter of fact, then the protocol shall also apply to traditional knowledge associated with these genetic resources. Not any traditional knowledge, just the traditional knowledge associated with these genetic resources. And then you have the picture, the well-known Hoodia cactus, who did a lot of products and made a lot of benefits for many factories. And a man eating also some of them. What do we mean under the convention about genetic resources? Genetic resources is any genetic material of actual or potential value. And that's why I referred before in my introduction to any live or preserved specimen. And secondly, what we mean by utilization It's to conduct research, development on the genetic or on the biochemical composition of genetic resources. But there are different obligations depending for the kind of utilization you do. We'll see that afterwards. So how does it work? How does the ABS Nagoya Protocol work? It's a sort of a conversation between the provider country and the user. And the user has to ask the provider country what it's going to do, and if the providing country is agreeing with that. And during this conversation, they have also to deal about an agreement on how, for the activity proposed, the benefits is going to be shared. And this asking the providing countries is called a PIC. It's pre-informed consent, and a MAT is a transfer so an agreement on the transfer, mutual agreement transfer. So it's a system which is called PIC and MAT, and which is very much used in any sort of agreement in the biodiversity. And then all the documentation, because of the compliance problem, are stored at the international level and also at the national level. PIC and MAT is very important to be the tools for these ethical question and benefit sharing. So I'm very sorry to be so easy in the mission of the museum, but I'm going to compare. So just forgive me for being so simple. As far as I heard this morning, I'm not feeling very well with this slide, but okay. So you are dealing with acquisition and collection management. You are dealing with research. We are dealing with education, and you are dealing with awareness raising. And then you will see also that the convention and the protocol deal also with the same question. When we speak on conservation, we are dealing with activities ex situ. When we speak of sustainable use, we are dealing with activities in situ. And when we talk about the Nagoya Protocol, then we are talking about this ethical question. There are obligations for this ethical question, I just before said, but we will see how does it imply an obligation for the old collection. We talked about decolonization, so we will see how it acts on this process for the museum. Something is very important for the application of the protocol. It's the timeline. So if you had, it's always related to the definition of the protocol. I'm sorry, it's a bit technical, but if you had an access before the Nagoya Protocol, 2010, then, or you had an access plus a utilization before, you don't have to prove that you are compliant, so you don't fall under the Nagoya Protocol. If you have an access before and then a utilization after, then you will fall for this utilization under the condition of the protocol. It means that you have to make this PIC and MAT and share the benefits according to the kind of activity you are doing, mostly. And then if you do it afterwards, of course, you will end in this situation. And all the questions we talked about today, I'm sorry, oh, yes, it's my boss, she can wait. Sorry. She knows that I'm here, as a matter of fact. Sorry. Okay. As a matter of fact, when we talked the whole day about this decolonization process, then we are mostly in a situation as this one. In your actual work, if you do something with this old collection, you might fall into this situation. So I will skip the next one because it was a detailed explanation of what I exactly said, and I think it's a bit boring. So in my role of civil servant of the Federal Authority for setting into force Nagoya Protocol and the Convention, I allowed myself to make you some recommendation. I hope you will forgive me. And generally, this recommendation to acquire only biological material that has been legally accessed, so where you have the documentation, the full documentation, and from whether it's from in situ or ex situ, so from the land itself, or ex situ in museum in other collections. You have to manage and the collection and the associated data and traditional knowledge. And we heard also some cases of that this morning, which were for me very interesting because I had no idea of that. And and the associated knowledge and data in a way that the provider of the biological material, including any subsample, can be traced. And the traceability of the documentation and of the activity is really very important. It's important for the research on a scientific point of view, of course, but it's also very important for compliance of the Nagoya Protocol and to share that you are compliant to that. And use of the biological material, so utilization of the biological material in the sense of Nagoya has to be made only in a way consistent with the terms of condition of the agreement you made with the country. So you can just make a pick and mat and say, oh, okay, I'm going to collect that and put that in my museum, and then suddenly you have the idea that someone like a pharmaceutical industry could put money in your museum, and then you give these resources to the pharmaceutical industry and they make a perfume or whatever with that, and they have a benefit. You can do it, of course, but then you have to begin again the pick and mat system. And I know that it's a complication for museum because all of us are also always searching money for our institutions or also us for our project and everything, so it might be also a complication. But it's also a way of dealing with the biodiversity on a correct way. Sharing benefit with the providing country, develop institutional ABS policies. I have heard a lot of different documentation that you do, and they're completely in line with what could be an ABS policies as well. And train staff and inform authorized visitors and associates, and I heard a lot of that, so I don't have to make any recommendation about that, but it's very general. And maybe some recommendation for museum collection for old collection, which own old collection, and there I still have a mammal from Chudin, a guinea pig from Peru, and so Chudin. So if you have old collection which doesn't fall under Nagoya, ensure that the specimens in the collection are well documented. I heard also this morning, but I knew also before, that it's a main job of the museum, and it's a huge job. And I was also very interested in this question of renaming species, because then it's also a question of traceability. And right. Ensure that the specimens in the collection are well documented, and if documentation is insufficient or non-existent, it can happen, and I think it happened quite a lot of time. This material should not be used for research and not be available to other people for further utilization. And for compliance, then please just store all document permits, ABS contracts and other information, and pass them with the genetic resources and the traditional knowledge. It has to own that. So, good news. The decolonization process, as you understood, doesn't fall under Nagoya Protocol and also under the national laws, because most of this activity has been done before 10 and before 14 for Switzerland. In Europe, I don't remember when the directive was ratified. But and then just to give you some idea of what could be done. So I heard that all the institutions are very much concerned about what they are going to do with that, the way to do it. So we have in the ABS system under Nagoya some proposal for non-monetary benefit sharing, and if interesting for you, it could be also give you some idea of how to share benefits when you don't fall under the protocol, but you might maybe do something when you decide to do so for social and ethical reason when part of your mission. And this is also a picture of the house of Jakob von Tschudin during his stay in Peru in 1846. Right. And I heard also a lot about guns. Then you see also that he has a gun somewhere. No, sorry, here. There. And there is someone, probably an indigenous people working for him. Thank you very much for your attention.